We begin with news from the Middle East. President Joe Biden spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a tense phone call that lasted roughly 30 minutes. And for the first time since the start of the war in Gaza, the United States has threatened to withdraw its support from Israel. President Biden castigated Prime Minister Netanyahu for failing to protect civilians and aid workers. Now, this comes after an Israeli airstrike targeted and killed at least 7 foreign aid workers in central Gaza earlier this week. President Biden said, quote, "We've gone from a hug to a handshake to a slap on the wrist today," end quote. Now the U.S. has urged Israel to agree to an immediate ceasefire in exchange for the return of 100 hostages. Washington has also demanded greater accountability from the Israeli military for the deaths of civilians in Gaza.
The president emphasized that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation are unacceptable. He made clear the need for Israel to announce a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps. If we don't see the changes that we need to see, there'll be changes in our own policy.
Now, the White House has laid out what it expects from Israel going forward while doubling down on mounting international pressure for an investigation into the Israeli airstrike that killed the foreign aid workers.
In terms of concrete steps, what we are looking to see and hope to see here in coming hours and days is a dramatic increase in humanitarian assistance getting in, additional crossings opened up, and a reduction in the violence against civilians and certainly aid workers. We want to see that even as the Israelis work through their investigation, that they are willing and able to take practical, immediate steps to protect aid workers on the ground and to demonstrate that they have that civilian harm mitigation in place.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken also made some rather stern remarks on Israel's handling of the crisis in Gaza.
It's the current reality in Gaza. Despite important steps that Israel has taken to allow assistance into Gaza, the results on the ground are woefully insufficient and unacceptable. 100% of the population in Gaza knows acute levels of food insecurity. 100% of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance. And those working heroically to provide that assistance are doing so in great peril to their own lives. This week's horrific attack on the World Central Kitchen was not the first such incident. It must be the last.
Now, as international calls for accountability grow, Israel says it has in fact completed a thorough investigation into the airstrike and promised to make the findings public.
Today we presented our investigation into the serious incident in which people of the WCK were tragically killed. We investigated it deeply, independently, by Reserve General Yov Harivan. He presented it to Chief of Staff, and it's being presented to the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister. And I believe that after we present this to the ambassadors from the respective countries and to the members of the WCK organization, we will make it public in a clear, transparent manner, and that will happen soon.
Israel has reportedly sacked 2 military personnel after concluding that they have misidentified the foreign aid workers as Hamas. Now the Israeli cabinet has approved the reopening of the border crossing between Israel and Northern Gaza for the first time since the war began in October of last year. President Biden, however, is demanding Prime Minister Netanyahu make significant changes to his military plans or risk losing valuable American support. However, the White House is yet to specify the changes in its policy if, in fact, Israel fails to protect civilians in Gaza. For now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has assured President Biden of immediate steps to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. However, the Israeli leader is yet to get back to the White House on what changes the Israeli military will undertake in its war efforts. As the White House lays down the gauntlet on Netanyahu, it is clear change is in fact imminent. Watch this space for more updates. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.